Question to terminate or suspend filming or recording if, in my opinion, continuation of the filming, recording or reporting would disrupt or prejudice the proceedings, infringe the rights of any individual, or may lead to the breach of a legal obligation by the council. Aisha, can you just confirm that the meeting is webcast and streamed with no issues? Fine, let's go on.
Chair, we're live, yeah.
Thank you. Item 2. Chief Executive.
Mr Mayor, I've received apologies from the following councillors: Councillor Desneves, Councillor Peacock, Councillor Rossetti, Councillor Ogihor, Councillor Adamu, Councillor Amin, Councillor Basu, Councillor Chirankanda, Councillor Weston, Councillor Bradderson, Councillor Demir, Councillor Moeed, Councillor Da Costa, Councillor Mark Blake, Councillor Hearn, Councillor Carroll, and apologies for lateness from Councillor Ejiofor.
Thank you. Any other apologies for lateness? Councillor Ibrahim's here. No. Okay. Item 3. Late items of urgent business. Chief Executive.
Mr Mayor, I'm asking you to agree the admission of the following late items of business that could not be available earlier and need to be dealt with. Item 7.1, the draft council calendar of 2023. This was to further common meeting to be filled for meetings taking place before the end of this municipal year. Item 10A, revised community infrastructure levy charging schedule. This was late due to consideration at Cabinet on the 8th of March after the publication of council papers and requires agreement to implement the revised community infrastructure charging schedule. Item 10B, Standards Committee report, was late to allow finalisation and consultation on the report. There is a need to agree the members' allowance scheme for 2022-23 prior to the 31st of March and agree the extension of the appointment of the independent members to the Standards Committee at an ordinary meeting of the Council prior to the 30th of June 2022. Item 10C, the report from Corporate Committee on Treasury Management mid-year update. The reason for lateness was due to Corporate Committee meeting after the publication of Council papers. Item 13, questions and written answers. The reason for lateness is that notice of questions is not requested until 8 clear days before the meeting, following which the matters raised have to be researched and replies prepared to be given at the meeting. And item 14, motions. The amendments to motions are not requested until 10 a.m. on the day of the council meeting, and we have received an amendment to motion G, which has been published and distributed today as a supplementary pack.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Have some water. I accept those late items of business. Item 4, declarations of interest. Under the Council's agreed Code of Conduct, members are required to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or prejudicial interest as defined by the Code at any meeting, and may not participate in any discussion or vote on the matter and must withdraw from the meeting room. Details of the requirement to make a declaration of interest are shown on your printed summons at item 5. Should any member need to make any such declaration, you should do so now by clearly stating the reasons and the nature of the interest. Members with a sensitive interest, as defined in the Code, must declare that they have a disclosable interest, but the details of that interest need not be disclosed. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay. Item 5. minutes of the meetings held on the 22nd of February and the 1st of March. Chief Executive.
Mr. Mayor, I would ask the Council to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of February 2022 and the 1st of March 2022.
Are they agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 6, Mayor's Communications. Colleagues will have no doubt paid keen attention to the update I provided on March the 1st, so I don't plan to provide another one because there hasn't been many updates in the last fortnight. I'll just say 3 quick things on that, despite saying that. Firstly, today is Commonwealth Day, and we raised the flag outside George Mean House. For many of us in this chamber will come from, have links to, or planning to move to Commonwealth nations. My father was from Zimbabwe, which, although not a Commonwealth country now, it was, and you'll all know that my grandfather was Jamaican, so it's an important day to reflect and acknowledge the diversity both of the Commonwealth and also our borough here, so that was an important thing to do. I'd like to just notify members that a number of members of the community have come together to set up a concert for Ukraine on Sunday. Shout out to Councillor Connor, who's bought her tickets already. Thank you very much indeed, leading by example. I hope other colleagues will follow Councillor Connor's lead to buy tickets. It's being held at Holy Innocents Church in Hornsey and is, although they're using the Mayor's Special Fund because it was easier and a more transparent way of collecting the money, this is very much a community organised event. So I hope colleagues will come along and show some support. And it will be, of course, no surprise when you think about who I'm getting married to, that I wish anyone interested in, connected to, from Ireland, a very happy St. Patrick's Day for the 17th of March, which is also my father's birthday. Agenda item 7, Chief Executive.
Mr. Mayor, item 7.1 sets out the changes to political groups and seeks changes to the committee memberships of Staffing and Remuneration Committee and the Main Licensing Committee. These are set out at paragraphs 4.5 and 4.8. And item 7.2 is an outline of the draft schedule of meetings for the municipal year 2022-23.
Thank you very much. Councillor Say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the report and the recommendations, please.
Thank you. Are those recommendations in the reports agreed to? Good, thank you. Agenda item 8, Monitoring Officer.
Mr. Mayor, I have no matters to report on.
Thank you. Agenda item 9, the 11th Annual Carbon Report. Call the Deputy to the Council. You're moving the report, aren't you?
Oh. Yes, yeah, I would like to move the report, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. We are saving some time up here. Is that report agreed to? All right, very good. Agenda item 10. This is item 10A, the revised Community Infrastructure Levy Charge Schedule, and I call on Councillor Bevan to move item 10A. Just once, yep, go. Speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to move this report, item 10A, concerning the Community Infrastructure Levy. Just a brief history. Many of you know, perhaps not many of the public, that the Community Infrastructure Levy was introduced some years ago to produce funds to facilitate infrastructure to enable the council to deliver various services to residents, including parks, schools and various other services. When it was implemented, it had to be done in a way that didn't make developments unviable, with the result that the fee charged in the east of the borough was very low. It was £15 compared with £2.85 in the west of the borough. Over the years, the viability of the east of the borough has increased, and we've had a review of the rates that are applying, and the rates now going to apply have been increased in the east of the borough from £15 to £55. And also we have introduced charges for build-to-rent housing in the east of the borough as well. And now these extra charges will bring more money in to facilitate various community assets that the council needs to provide. So I'm very pleased to move this report and ask that you all support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Are there any questions? Nope. Okay. Are the recommendations agreed to? Thank you. Item 10B, Standards Committee report on the approval of the Members' Allowance Scheme 2022-23 and the extension of appointment of an independent person on the Standards Committee. A very speedy Councillor Poku.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I move on the report, I'd like to actually thank all the officers that worked really hard over the past 4 years on the Standards Committee to get all the paperwork done. And as Exec said, not Chief Exec, Chief to be member of it is. So I would now like to formally move the report as set out in the committee report and hope people will be able to approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Poku. Are there any questions to the Chair of the Standards Committee? Nope. Are those recommendations? Thank you. Agenda item 3, Councillor. Thank you. Okay, good. Right, agenda item 11. The Haringey, and we are actually 17 minutes ahead of schedule, so we may even get to the to be able to make some valedictory comments if they so choose.
Damu was the mayor in 2011, 2012. If I'm right, or of course, if the Haringey website is right. But my community is even more proud when it can help others and when it can take its place in Team Haringey. That's why I rebuilt the Haringey Faith Network, because I saw how much faith was important to Team Haringey. If you want to win on the pitch, you need faith, especially, of course, if you are a Spurs fan. To me, had to get that one in. To me, a team suggests different roles, different styles, different identities, not cloning people to come out with the same, but loving and immersing in the diversity that already exists. I think of my grandparents who left Germany with nothing. My great-grandparents who left the Russian Empire. They made a life here. And in many ways, they needed to assimilate their identity to get on in life here. We should not need to expect people to be less traditional, to be less who they are, in order that they flourish here. And that surely is what Team Haringey can offer. Of course, leadership and management is also critical to the success of the team. And of course, a united Haringey team is important, and a united leadership is important. And often when people talk about Haringey and our democratic leadership, they don't talk of a united body. They talk of splits and they talk of difference. And if we're going to get people together and build an even better Haringey, it needs to be built from the top. We need to build links with the team as well. So the management, the coaching staff, if you like, the upstairs lot as well, all of you, of course, and Haringey Council will want to build and have done links with the team, with the players, with those who share different, of course, who have different and diverse identities. And so I would suggest we need, unless we already have, and I haven't looked, of course, a community network strategy. We already are looking that way. And I know from my perspective in the Faith Network, working with Councillor Doggan, who's here, I know we work on, and Councillor Doggan has said, to bring people in from the periphery. It's about building the links with communities where they are. It's not just about preventing. Often we work through prevention. I know that with the Faith Network. It's about proactively doing good, proactively creating cohesion. It needs to be about positive building of community together. And that way, the great work that Haringey does can, I believe, be even better going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David. A problem that we haven't had before is we were meant to be at this item at 8:07, and Jerry Robinson, who's head teacher at the Haringey Learning Partnership, who was going to speak about young people in the sport they provide, the important role they have, was arriving at 8 o'clock as she was told, but we now have 9 minutes until Jerry arrives. So, pardon? Pardon? All right. So I think maybe what we'll do is start some of the debate, and then when Jerry arrives, she can sort of help weave through. So I'm going to do what I did last time, which is shake up the list to make sure folks are all paying attention. And let's start with, my new friend, Councillor Connor, who got tickets. Councillor Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'm delighted to speak at this debate to advocate for our residents, expert by experience, to be truly part of designing and monitoring any new service. The previous approach of giving our residents a voice is slowly changing to empowering residents through the co-production of services within adult social care. How many times have we been out to residents groups only to be told, you listen to our concerns, but nothing happens? Co-production is a catch-all for saying we actively want service users, our residents, to have a seat at the top table. From the moment a project or change is discussed within the council, we actively look to include those who it will affect. We set up a specific group with terms of reference, minutes taken, actions reported on, and most importantly, amongst our officers sit our residents with an equal voice. True empowerment for our residents, those with mental health issues, those who are elderly and need support, those with a disability. So not engagement, not consultation, but co-production, which follows a project from its conception to conclusion, true ability to monitor service delivery and work within a team to change things that don't work and celebrate things that do. We all know the issues that crop up that could have been resolved if only residents with experience had been involved. We all know that our service users, our residents who have a wealth of knowledge that will be invaluable in developing our services, challenging our delivery and pushing for innovative ways to improve. Some of the council's recent innovations, such as Osborne Grove, have embodied co-production with our residents and have shown how residents with experience have really changed the design and service offer for the better. In other cases, such as the Lower Traffic Neighbourhood Scheme, a missed chance to co-produce this project meant the council is now going back to resident disability groups to understand how these changes will impact them. This retrospective way of working can leave residents frustrated as their voices weren't heard at the outset. So I would emphasise how vital this new way of working is. Without co-production across all areas, we may lose trust of residents as we look to build better partnership with our communities and deliver better services. I really hope that the Adults and Health Scrutiny Panel's recommendations around strengthening co-production will be taken up and actively implemented across not just adult social care, but the whole council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connor, with 1 minute and 25 seconds to spare, so well done. Councillor Say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've served as a Labour councillor in the Bounds Green ward for the last 4 years and have been impressed by how much an active Labour Party branch can do for its area. We have an ideal opportunity through the structures that the Labour Party has to connect to our local communities directly and to work with people to help solve local problems. In Bounds Green, one of the biggest issues has been and is poverty. The austerity years have been very difficult for our communities and have impacted on our poorest residents the most. Bounds Green Labour Party volunteers were instrumental in setting up the local food bank, as well as a mutual aid organisation, to ameliorate the effects that savage Tory cuts have had. These organisations were crucial in helping communities deal with the pandemic and in helping the many very isolated and desperate people in straightforward, practical ways. You could say they were acting more like community workers than politicos, but maybe that's what we should be. Local councillors are in an ideal position to support and champion initiatives like this and to signpost residents to local services. I am grateful that I've now been given the chance to represent people in the White Hart Lane ward, where I live, and if I am elected, I'll be able to bring the experience of the community-oriented, active and practical Bounds Green branch to work to enable White Hart Lane branch to be the community link that is so desperately needed. There seems to be little chance of this appalling Tory government losing an election anytime soon, so it is up to us in local government to try and shield and protect our residents, our communities from the harsh realities that is life under such self-serving, selfish and greedy opportunists from central government. I am looking forward to working to grow White Hart Lane branch into an organisation people want to join, get involved with and are proud of. We can do this by harnessing the enthusiasm of our local young people to the experience and understanding of our elders to forge a branch which is seen locally as a community resource for all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Say. You've left us a minute and 15 seconds. You're meant to be helping me here as we wait for Jerry to arrive. Let's go to Councillor Ross, who I hope will use an extra minute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually going to talk later on in the to our motion, but
you can do
in
both.
The nature of this debate, I'm going to actually bring my speech forward. I've had a fairly privileged upbringing. I grew up in a loving home with both parents around me, and I took it for granted that either or both of them would look after my best interests. Unfortunately, my mother did not have such a happy childhood. Her mother, my grandmother, was in long-term treatment in hospital, and my mum lived in Muswell Hill Broadway with her younger brother and my grandfather. When she was just 7, at the start of the Depression in the 1930s, they were all evicted and lived in a barn in a field at the bottom of Coney Hatch Lane, until inevitably they were discovered, and my mum and 4-year-old brother were taken into care. She went to a children's home in Coppets Road, just down the road from Rabbi David's synagogue. And he, at the age of 4, went to a different one in Free and Barnet. They didn't see each other until years later at the start of the Second World War. They didn't see their parents until it was over nearly a dozen years after they went into care. That's a long preamble to the point I want to make. There was no one at any point in their early lives who was able or willing to make the decision, which maybe we as a council would take nowadays, to insist that the siblings would stay together. Imagine being taken away from your dad and then being split from your younger brother. So that's where the role of the council and our role as councillors is so important. Obviously, someone thought that there was no space for a 4-year-old in Coppets Road. Maybe it would cost a little more to keep them together, who knows, after 90 years. Someone just took the decision without any regard for sibling relationships and did something that was convenient for all concerned, except for the children. It had a profound effect both on my mum and my uncle. As corporate parents, councillors have a collective responsibility for providing the best possible care and safeguarding for the children who are looked after by us as an authority. Councillors should be champions of our looked after children when the convenient thing may be for someone to make a decision concerning their welfare, which is wrong. Rabbi David talked about being part of a team and also about the players being on the pitch. In 2011, the Ofsted review said that, and I quote, "Training is already provided to all members on both corporate parenting and safeguarding. Attendance is a matter for members to address. In practice, attendance has been very high." That was in 2011. How things have changed in the ensuing 10 years, and I'm sure Councillor Barbara Blake will blame this on the coalition. In the past 3 years, there have been 12 Labour members for a committee which allows just 5 Labour members. In the past year on Corporate Parenting Advisory Committee, 3 of the Labour councillors didn't bother to turn up for any of the meetings. The committee has appeared to operate a revolving door for Labour councillors, where they come and go or don't bother at all. It's such an important committee, and councillors should value their place on it. Sometimes young people have given up their time to talk to the committee about their experiences, and councillors should value them and prioritise having the chance to hear from them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Dunn. Oh, sorry. Councillor Poku. Sorry, just take your seat, Cabinet Member. Sorry. Is it a point of order?
Yeah, I suppose just a point that Councillor Ross just mentioned about the Corporate Parenting Committee.
Right.
I'm on the committee. I've not been able to attend because of meeting clashes. But so just to let him know that it's not because I don't want to go to the meetings, because of meeting clashes. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's been made as a point, perhaps for the calendar that will yet to be confirmed at the AGM. We'll make sure that there are as fewer clashes as possible in the forthcoming municipal year. And Jerry, perfect timing. Almost as if you and Councillor Poku were in communications. Do you want to come straight up to the mic? And sorry to throw you onto the steps, onto the whatever the phrase is. Don't worry, we're all very nice here.
So, hi, good evening. Sorry, I've just walked in the door, so a little bit thrown, but I believe that I'm here to talk about Team Haringey and the work that we've been doing at Haringey Learning Partnership over the last 20 months, almost 2 years now. So for those of you who don't know, Haringey Learning Partnership was formed in September 2020, and it brought together all of the alternative provision schools and services in Haringey. So that's the pupil referral unit, which I think people will be aware was formerly called the Octagon, but also our medical needs tuition service, Simmons House, our psychiatric inpatient provision, and our outreach services and our primary nurture hub. And through that process, we became one organisation, which I think is really key, because we became an integral part of Haringey, and it was almost a process of quite an unusual process in Haringey, a process of de-academisation, an unusual process nationally, I guess, in that Haringey Learning Partnership was brought back into the local authority. So previously the Pupil Referral Unit was an academy, it was part of the TBAP Academy Trust, and was brought back into local authority, and genuinely became, I think, truly a really important part of Haringey and of what we do in Haringey and what we represent in Haringey. And when I started in role, 20 months ago now, I spoke to some young people who had been at the Pupil Referral Unit, so that's students who've been excluded from school, who had been there for in one cases, and Adam will know who I'm speaking about, one case 5 years, he'd been permanently excluded in year 7 for an incident in McDonald's after school where he'd been scratching a table with a knife. This was a young person with ADHD, lots of other complexities in his life, but he was permanently excluded in year 7 and sent to the Octagon. He'd been there for 5 years when I joined, he was in year 11. And I spoke to him not long after starting and asked him about his experiences. And he told me that he had wasted 4 years of his life. And he said, not only have I missed out educationally, I've missed out socially. And that really stood out for me. And I asked him what he meant by that. And he said, when I was sent here, I was forgotten about. I was dumped here. Nobody's interested in what we do. Nobody cares about what we do. And for me, that seemed like such a powerful statement, this idea that young people in Haringey were being dumped as they saw it somewhere and forgotten about. People gave up on them. And it was not long after that, in the October, that we had a Black History Month exhibition. And that young person was a key part of that exhibition in terms of arranging it and organising it. And we invited visitors to that exhibition. It was the first time, really, that Commerce House, which was previously the Octagon, that the doors were thrown open and we invited people to come and see what we were doing. And on that day, the mayor and other people from Haringey Council, lots of people from the community came to Commerce House, and that student was part of a group of students who showed the visitors around. And for the first time, that young man felt so proud of himself and proud of his school and proud of what he had achieved. And I think it was a massive turning point for us. He went on to leave successfully with a good set of GCSEs and to be able to go on to college and do the next thing in his life. He was invited for tea with the mayor. He got a letter recognising what he'd done. And it was a turning point, and it showed me what can be achieved when we believe in our young people, when we show them what their potential is, when we show them how proud we are of them. You know, he is one example, but I think it's important to say that at Haringey Learning Partnership over the last 2 years, we really have transformed the picture for young people who have quite often felt like they're cast out or dumped or not part of Haringey or not part of our society. We did some analysis of our permanent exclusion figures just last week. And in the last 3 years, and if we compare like for like, so pre-pandemic, we've reduced our permanent exclusions in Haringey by 77%. We've reduced our permanent exclusions of young people of Black Caribbean heritage, which were some of the worst in the country, by 86%. And I think when we talk about Team Haringey, it really has been a concerted effort of everybody coming together and thinking differently about our young people and saying that they do matter and they do have a future and that we're committed to seeing and hearing them. And that's, you know, a very different story for some of the young people who've been in alternative provision in the past in Haringey, that they now feel, I hope they all feel, that they're part of our community, that their voices matter, and that we're working together to give them a better future, and that they can be part of deciding what that future looks like. So I guess all I want to say today is that Haringey is an incredible borough. I've worked in Haringey for nearly 7 years. It's a very exciting borough to be part of, but it's a borough where if we work together, and I think we've shown that at Haringey Learning Partnership, we can make a difference that improves the lives of our young people very, very quickly when there is real commitment from everyone in the community to make a change and do something different.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you for all you all do for our young people. By all means, stay and enjoy the rest of the debate if you'd like to. The most amazing thing was the young person to which you just referred. As I walked into this building at 6 o'clock this evening, I could hear someone shouting Adam, and you know, I get shouted many things at me, not always my name. And there he was standing in front, but he was a little too cool for school to come and join us. I did ask if he wanted to come to the council meeting tonight, but he was heading off to get some food. So the most bizarre coincidence that he would be outside here as I walked in. Scott, or Councillor Emery.
Apologies. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback off this speaker here, and it's been quite distracting. Hopefully that'll fix it, I'm guessing, by what you've just done there. Thanks for that.
Thanks. As I've just been sneezed on by the Deputy Mayor, which is fantastic.
Covered my mouth.
Yeah, this way. Anyway, thank you, Jerry. Let's resume the debate. And the last speaker, I think, was Councillor. Who was it? Yeah. So that means someone over here. Councillor Carlin, are you ready? Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor Stone. I did come to you next. Sorry. But we'll go to Councillor Carlin to save you up. Press once.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful to you for calling this debate and for being able to say a few words tonight in this last meeting of the 2018-22 municipal term. Hornsey first became my home almost 30 years ago, and it remains as much of a pleasure today to serve its people as it did when I was first elected to the council alongside my ward colleagues. We live in difficult times, and the last 2 years show how much we all have to do to bring our people together. And that responsibility extends to each and every one of us in this room and those who will come down the line. There's a saying that I have, which I think I only really became aware of when I became a councillor, about what being a councillor is. We're local politicians, that's what we are. The term is a councillor. But the most important thing is that we are public servants. What we do is public service. Although we are politicians, What we do for our community and for our residents is what really is important and what really matters. And the last 18 months, 2 years, have been like no other in my living memory. And I want to say thank you to the good people of our community for their commitment and tenacity. Because as the virus spread throughout the country, our public sector workers didn't stop, flinch or hide. And on behalf of a grateful community, we have to thank them too. But our residents really stepped up. And as local politicians, it was our responsibility to actually help in that effort, to do whatever we could during the pandemic, to actually go out delivering food, to actually go out helping our residents, to actually disseminate information. And that was our role of public service in our communities. Last week, the world marked International Women's Day, a day when people across our world joined together to demand equal rights for women, to reject misogyny, and importantly, to celebrate the achievements of women in Haringey, in Haringey, and across the world. Back in the day when almost none of the world's women could vote, the first Women's Days demanded universal suffrage, full representation and protection in law for women everywhere. Now, over a century later, the vote, something so important, so private and so powerful, is available to women almost worldwide, but still not everywhere, because there are places where women do not have equal rights, equal pay and equal protection. That focus on representation, on tackling violence against women and girls, and on delivering real equality must form the basis of all we do in the forthcoming municipal term. I know the Scrutiny Committee said it was going to look into violence against women and girls, and hopefully we will make some more progress next year. I hope that the next chair of the committee will tackle these issues head on. Focusing on what brings us together, including those who weren't born here and who yet contribute so much, is vital. Celebrating our diversity, inclusion, change and difference must be our collective goal. I'm grateful to have the chance to stand in the election in my home community in Haringey in May. You know our community well, Mr. Mayor, and so I don't need to tell you about the good people who call our community home. I'm grateful to Rabbi Mason for his words tonight and for all he does to bring our community together in his role as the rabbi at Muswell Hill Synagogue and of course as the chair of the Multi-Faith Forum. I am a proud Jewish woman, a proud South African, though that was a very long time ago that I came here, and a proud member of Team Haringey. And the fight against anti-Semitism has loomed large locally, and that's to the eternal shame of some. I don't believe you can be an anti-racist if you don't understand that picking and choosing which community to support is racist in itself. So irrespective of wealth and privilege, I want to reaffirm my commitment to Team Haringey and promise I will do everything that I can to do what I can for those who call Haringey home. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Communities have always been my passion. Strong communities are supportive, resilient, united, and also good for our health and well-being. I've campaigned in my community for more than 16 years, and my passion for the community was the reason I stood as a Lib Dem councillor. Being a councillor meant that I could mobilise the council and council services where needed. And for me, it's been the greatest privilege to serve my community and the borough over the last 8 years. I'm very proud that we have a strong sense of community in my Highgate ward, helped by the many community groups, schools, churches and local businesses, all who play a pivotal role in community cohesion. Communities are strengthened when they come together with a common aim, and particularly when dealing with a threat. The COVID pandemic is a great example where we saw neighbours reaching out to neighbours who they had never previously had contact with. Residents donated food for local food banks, street WhatsApp groups were set up, Zoom events arranged, new friendships formed. As a result, our community in Highgate has been considerably strengthened by our collective response to the pandemic. And we extended our support to the wider community by setting up a dedicated Highgate fundraiser with Haringey Giving to provide much needed funding to community groups across our borough who supported Haringey residents throughout the pandemic. The cost of living crisis, which is now a reality, will require communities to continue to support each other. Food bank aid, set up by a Highgate resident during COVID to provide food to local food banks, reported 1,600 new people accessing local food banks in recent weeks. And those numbers will continue to rise as more and more people struggle to buy food and pay for fuel. And communities will also need to come together to welcome and support the many Ukrainian refugees who settle in our borough. The role of communities has never been so important as it is in these difficult and troubling times, and the work that councillors do in their wards will be critical in ensuring a strong community response. We are elected by our residents to help and support them, and I believe that the work we do in our communities must always be our priority. As I'm standing down as a councillor, I'd like to take this opportunity to say goodbye to fellow councillors on both sides of the chamber and to the many council officers I have worked with. And of course, to wish all our communities in Haringey the very best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Doan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This debate is about bringing all the communities who call Haringey home together. If you indulge me, Mr. Mayor, I want to share how this Labour administration rooted in our communities has reached out to all of our people and developed strong reference services, and how we will continue to do so. We developed the Kurdish and Turkish Network Group, which emerged during the pandemic. We have launched Somalian Community Network. We are continuously working with the Multi-Faith Network, which brings Haringey faith groups together. And I know that strong words of Rabbi Mason will be taken on board and absorbed. I am particularly pleased how we are engaging with the Eastern European communities, many of whom lived in South Tottenham and Wood Green. The Latin American and Latin Caribbean network of organizations acknowledged with Solutions Awards Corner that everyone said was impossible, but this council leader got done. Last month was Pride Month, and in the world where LGBT community still faces hate, bigotry, and evil, I stand with them every single day. I am also pleased to acknowledge the work of Haringey Community Gold. It is an amazing operation that engaged with over 6,000 young people and beyond. We are developing a digital strategy to support our residents. The pandemic has shown how pivotal it is for our residents to access digital infrastructure and to find the virtual world accessible. This Labour Council has also arranged bespoke surgery sessions for underrepresented communities to assist them with their needs, e.g. housing, repair, support with the new parking system and early years. I am proud what this administration has achieved in the last 4 years. I am grateful to the leader for appointing me to her cabinet as the first Alevi Kurd to sit in the cabinet in many years. Colleagues will know that I have been selected to stand in new ward of Bruce Castle, and so I will be leaving Seven Sisters Ward in May. I want to say thank you to Councillor Blake for being such a fun, strong and brilliant ward colleague. Councillor Blake faced some knocks over the past few years, but she got the right backup. And I send her my best wishes as she continues to serve the people of Seven Sisters. I want to say a special word for thanks to Councillor Basu, I think he's not here today, for his work in Seven Sisters over the many years. He is a former mayor of this borough and a history maker. Mr. Mayor, you were 3 years of age when Councillor Basu was elected to this council, and the fact that you now occupy your position speaks alone how long he has served our people and how committed he has been. Thank you, Councillor Basu, for all you have done for Haringey. And thank you all the good people who welcomed me with open arms right across Seven Sisters after I was elected in 2018. I am proud to have the opportunity to stand in the election in May to recommit myself to the people of Haringey to win their trust. I hope to see you on the other side. Thank you.
Councillor Hare.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. Going the wrong way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was a member of the Planning Committee for 8 years with celebrity appearances since. I'd like to tell you about 4 of those years because they were quite unlike my other experiences. Planning is not supposed to be political, but too often votes do follow party lines. The chair for the 4 years I'm going to tell you about was Councillor Tom Davidson, a lawyer, barrister, now a judge. He sought to depoliticise the decision-making. He opened to all committee members the chair's briefing with 1 or 2 senior planning officers, at which there was a run-through of the applications for the next meeting. Of course, there were no decisions, but the logic of the officer recommendations could be explored in a way that could not be done in a public meeting. It's often said there is no such thing as a stupid question in a meeting, but as all of us know, there are daft questions, and actually, I'm sure that all of us fear being the member who asks one. More importantly, officers could be frank. Sometimes the message would be, please don't refuse this on those grounds because we couldn't defend it. Equally, sometimes the message from officers would be, we were on the fence, or even, we didn't really like it, but we've left it for the committee to decide. If at the meeting the members want to refuse it, that will be fine, and we could help you formulate the reasons. It was very helpful. Enough members attended for the committee as a whole to have a good chance of getting better results. The TSB used to boast that it was the bank that liked to say yes, a great advertisement for a bank, but not a good one for a council planning committee. It's not that a refusal means nothing will happen, but that what will happen should be better. Good design is fundamental to the future of the borough because it affects whether people and businesses choose to locate here. Long after the dust of building has settled and people living in their new homes, what we build today will be affecting the attractiveness and the prosperity of the local area. My colleague, Councillor Connor, spoke about co-production, taking the sidedness out of the planning process so the members of the committee are better able to work together and with officers is a fundamental first step in our own co-production. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hare. Councillor Barbara Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, Councillor Ross, I don't blame the coalition for everything. I mean, I did have to wait 40 minutes the other week for a bus in the rain, but I blamed the Tory government. I did not blame the coalition. And in fact, when you were saying that, I was just sitting there thinking, I agree with more or less everything Councillor Connor has said in her speech. Just goes to show that I should never have a nice thought about the Liberal Democrats, should I? Because I was sitting there thinking, Pippa, I agree with everything you say. But let me just say this, politics is a rough old business. You're the opposition, and it's absolutely right that you bring us to task and past Labour governments. And I think, you know, that's absolutely right that you have done that. I was just about to say you've done that well, and I changed my. But it's right that you should do that, and it's right that we should bring you to task as well, and past governments. I've been a councillor for 8 years, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And I'm sure a lot of you know that I've had a bit of a bumpy ride this time. But one thing I will not forget is the number of people who contacted me, the number of Liberal Democrats who contacted me, the number of people here who rang me, who spoke to me when I was sitting on my own, so that I was not isolated. I won't forget that, because that's about kindness and it's about decency at the worst, one of the worst times of my life. So to all my colleagues here, and you all know who you are, and I'm getting emotional now, thank you. And I just want to also say, co-production, I agree. I love meeting residents. I love being out planting bulbs. I love working with them to make the environment prettier, cleaner, safer. Co-production, I think we don't want old, meetings and matters arising. We need meetings where people are really a part of what they're planning. So I absolutely agree with what you say, and with you as well, Councillor Morris, and I wish you, everybody here, good luck for the future. Thank you.
I thought we were getting more of the same, Councillor Blake, but that was a Monday special. Councillor Palmer.
I'm on now. Thank you. Jerry kind of stole my thunder. I'm not really sure I can top what Jerry had to say, but I want to talk about young people too. So children and young people are our future, and although there are differences in need and the level of need across the borough, they all deserve to be front and centre of our thinking. Now, I've spoken about the impact of the pandemic on young people before, and I think we probably all agree that our children and young people have experienced an incredibly challenging time over the last 2 years. I don't think there's a parent that I know that would say that their child hasn't been impacted. We know that their education, their physical and mental health, employment and further education opportunities have all been seriously impacted. The effects of climate change will be catastrophic for our children. They are in fact far more aware of this, and they want to take far more action than most adults. And yet here we all are, still arguing about whether the effects of pollution really do damage their health. We're still arguing about whether we should or shouldn't try and reduce car usage. We're not really investing in better ways to dispose of our rubbish, and we're still intent on destroying our planet because as adults we refuse to make compromises to our own lives. And our children are living through a time of unprecedented global uncertainty. There are horrific conflicts and human rights atrocities taking place across the globe. They're having to watch the horrors of the war in Ukraine unfolding. They're living through the impacts of Brexit, a hard-right, racist, xenophobic, classist government that doesn't care a less about most of us. So whilst much of this can't be resolved by us alone, there are plenty of things that we can do here in Haringey to support our children and young people. So step one, let's get the Tories out. Let's stop voting for the Tory government. As soon as we do that, we can make some real change happen. I'm also really keen on using my professional skills to make a difference. So I'm actually running some classes in health data science for National Science Week this week at my son's school. So if you've got a professional skill, I really encourage you to volunteer. Schools and community organisations desperately need those professional skills. And I know lots of young people are really struggling at the moment for work experience. So again, if you work in an organisation that has the capacity to offer it, please reach out. Let's encourage play streets. Let's encourage kids to get physically active. Let's encourage communities to come together. Let's see what car-free streets might look like. Let's get young people to lobby for more and safer cycling and walking. Let's let them lobby for more action on the environment, for better recycling, for cleaner air. Let's encourage our community to actually listen to the voices of young people on climate change. Let's support children's play spaces and green spaces. Local parks always have clean-up events, fundraising activities, and let's not build on green spaces. Let's protect them instead. Let's support refugee families that come to this borough. Let's champion the voices of children at all times here. When we think about co-production, let's make sure we ask children and young people what they think. Let's make sure that we understand what they want. And critically, let's always believe in them. Let's create a borough that is truly child first. Thank you.
Okay, we've got 3 more speakers and then we'll wind up. So we'll call Councillor Hakata. Have you got remarks?
Thank you,
Deputy Leader.
Mr. Mayor. And I'm not going to totally agree with Councillor Blake and her comments about Councillor Connor's speech. I have a few words to say about that, but I'll get to that in a minute. The last weekend, we held the Haringey's first ever Parks Summit, which was a co-production event with the community and the Park Service and the Carbon Service coming together to co-produce our Parks and Green Spaces strategy. And there is a word for when the community and the local government or government come together as equal partners to create something collectively. It's called socialism, and that is why this process is being led by this administration. Now, community-led grassroots action on climate change is something I'm most passionate about, and I want to thank the Mayor for the opportunity to debate this subject in the Chamber this evening. Climate change has quickly gone from being a future threat to a present danger, evidenced by the unprecedented flooding that impacted residents and businesses in Tottenham just last year. Often, climate change is seen as a huge and nebulous issue, so much so that the scope of what needs to be done can seem insurmountable, paralysing policymakers and those able to make change. It's become clear that the national and international politicians are being too slow to respond. They are reluctant to dismantle the old socio-economic structures which have elevated them to and kept them in power. This is why community action is key to climate change. We have everything to gain from addressing the climate emergency head on right now. By seeing climate change not as one huge global issue, but as the culmination of lots of small local issues, it becomes clear that a community-led grassroots action is the best and only way forward. It's also how we secure a just transition to net zero, leaving no one behind and empowering communities to meaningfully address climate change as it impacts their lives. Local action can be responsive to changes on the ground and more flexible in our approach to issues as they arise. Have a more meaningful and further reaching conversations with all of our communities so that we leave no one behind. Haringey Council has begun to embed environmental targets into all our decision making. We are already on site with our first zero carbon council homes, which will help the environment and lower the cost of household bills. We are removing carbon from all the council's frontline vehicles, cleaning up the air we breathe, and it's our policy that all council projects must be neutral, but positively impact on carbon, must be not just neutral, but positively impact carbon emissions. Tackling climate change brings an opportunity to create new democratic relationships with our residents. The council is committed to doing things with residents, not to them. Co-producing policy and opening opportunities for all kinds of participating, ensuring residents have a sense of ownership over their own neighbourhoods. Each community is different and has a different starting point, meaning the council must offer a range of routes to participation that meet everyone's needs. Now, just to go to Councillor Connor's point about low traffic neighbourhoods, she made the point that this was not co-production, and in fact what the council was doing was working backwards to engage people in the exemptions policy. And I just want to just set her straight there, that from the very start, the low traffic neighbourhood projects have been exemplary examples of us co-producing, learning from our mistakes as we go along, listening and working with communities to design massive infrastructure changes, right? And the exemptions policy is actually another example of how we are a pioneering council, because the exemptions every other council has started with the LTN program, then after 12 months, 18 months, brought in an exemptions policy. We're bringing it in from the beginning and working with disabled and carers groups and residents to design that. So I just wanted to make sure that you had that straight.
Thank you, Councillor.
And apparently I've run out of time. Okay, so I can't even finish on my great flourish. All right, I'll just say
Okay, go on.
Okay, the changes we make locally, the changes we make every single day to make better choices for our environment, that is how we address the climate emergency. The solution to the biggest global challenge we ever face is right here in Haringey. Thank you.
Thank you. A flourish worth waiting for, Deputy Leader. I'm glad we did. Now, final speech as a councillor from Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for inviting me to give my swan song. I just wanted to say a few words about Haringey and to acknowledge the many people who try to make it a better place to live. I moved here 35 years ago after we decided that North London seemed to be the ideal place to live for where we were working at the time. We didn't know the area at all, but I remember an estate agent trying to persuade us to view a property in the bit of N10 that comes into Barnet. And I said we couldn't possibly live in a Tory authority and we needed to look at properties in Haringey. And I'm so glad we made that decision. Unfortunately, of course, many Haringey residents face huge challenges and it's our role as councillors to work with partners to tackle those issues. And we're fortunate to have so many voluntary organisations and community leaders such as Rabbi David Mason working to support Haringey residents. And I've seen in Woodside Ward how residents come together to support their neighbours and to improve the local environment. We have some very committed Friends of Parks groups, neighbourhood watch groups, all working to make a difference. And we saw during the pandemic how quickly mutual aid groups were set up to support those in need. And our schools too make a huge contribution to helping families in need, and I thank them for that. It was great to hear from Jerry Robinson about the Haringey Learning Partnership and to see her continuing the excellent work that she did at Woodside High School. It's been an honour to represent the ward where I live. I've been a councillor since 2015, following the sad death of George Meehan. He was quite an act to follow, and I was never going to clock up 40 years on the council, which he did. Though in fact, I was a Labour councillor 40 years ago on a different authority, but I took a gap that ended up being 30 years between my two spells as a Labour councillor. But I've met some great colleagues here and I've seen that we also have some very dedicated council officers who share our aims of working with people to address their concerns. That task has been made a lot more difficult with years of austerity and a Tory government that just doesn't seem to have any understanding of what life is like for so many people. But we do have a council leadership that's determined to bring people together, to tackle inequality and discrimination, and I wish them all well for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. 30 years between stints. There's hope for all of us if things go wrong. Councillor Gordon, and then we'll come to our final speaker before the leader winds up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak in this debate, but I was prompted by a bit of a dig there from Councillor Connor about co-production. I think that what we've done from this side of the chamber is actually implement co-production from the bottom up.
And certainly in my experience in my own ward, it's exactly what we've done. 4 years ago when I was elected, I set up a group called the Friends of Hartington Park. That group now has got a mailing list of about 200 residents. They take part in the community forum, and they're extremely active residents in the local area. This phrase that we come across of hard to reach communities, I have no truck with that phrase, because all you've got to do is open the door. And we've done that with a co-production and co-design process in Down Lane Park that we've just started implementing in this administration, where we're going to be redesigning the park. Only a couple of weeks ago, I was at a meeting and we set up a community forum as part of that co-design, co-production process. And we managed to get 50 people along to the one meeting where they were absolutely brimming with ideas about how we're going to transform Down Lane Park. So there's no such thing as a poor way of co-producing something. You've just got to have the energy and the ideas to make it happen. And that's what we've demonstrated on this side of the chamber with our co-production and co-design process. And we're going to keep doing it, hopefully, in the next administration after May the 5th.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Our last speaker for the last time, Councillor Berryman.
Hello. Is that on?
We can hear you.
Oh, good.
Councillor Carlin, just turn your mic off, please.
You are kidding me, Mayor. Thank you for bringing me in at the very end when I thought I got away with it. Yeah, so I'm sailing out the door along with other councillors here tonight. Done my 8 years. It's been enjoyable. My attendance has slipped the past year. I thought Councillor Ross spoke very powerfully. I am guilty as charged there. Various reasons, one of which I kind of got very disengaged once meetings became virtual. So that kind of brings me to the subject of bringing Haringey together. I do think, as somebody else mentioned, we are social creatures, and that being with each other in person is important. And I think you can forget about the problems other people have if you don't face them. And that kind of brings me to another thing that I think is important in terms of bringing people together, which is democracy. So coming up for local elections, there'll be a lot of people here who will be knocking on doors and finding out what's really gone on behind them in some cases over the last couple of years when we were not out and about. And I think the pandemic's done a lot of damage to bringing Haringey together and bringing the country together. That's my opinion. I know people have taken part in food banks and so forth, but that's not how I've perceived it, and especially children, I think, suffered. So I'd love to end on a high note, but unlike Councillor Hare, the subject is bringing people together, not the planning committee. So I'm going to stick to the subject, but I do love it when Councillor Hare speaks. He's always very floral and eloquent. So yeah, listening to voters, listening to people, that is really our job as politicians. And if you don't listen, you're out. You know, you might get through because overall your party's listening. The way we work in Britain with our mainly two-party state, first past the post, the broad church is within the parties. We can see what's going on in Ukraine with a dictatorship invading. Would that have happened in a democracy in Russia? I don't know. But I think we mustn't underestimate how democracy helps to bring people together, how democracy relies on accepting the result, whether that be the referendum, which Keir Starmer has, or an election which Donald Trump didn't. So don't take that lightly, and don't take being around each other lightly. I think it matters. I will end on the last thing. Rabbi Mason is a fantastic speaker, and he coined the term Team Haringey. And that is one thing I think we should focus on in Haringey, is those team events, sport, festivals, carnivals, fun runs, fitness classes, and one I'd love to see return to Haringey one day, I'll get it in at the end, is the free fireworks at Ali Pali, which was once an event that really brought the borough together once a year. Thanks for my time here, and Mayor, thank you for bringing me in at the end. Thank you.
And for the wind-up, Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some really hard acts to follow.
tonight, and despite the fact we're about to go into a battle, I'd like to say that I think there's been some fantastic things said and some fantastic speeches on both sides, all sides of the chamber tonight. So really well done, everybody, tonight. We are lucky in this borough to have a wealth of active residents and community groups, and tonight we've just had a snippet of that. Thank you to David Mason and Jerry Robinson for coming here tonight, both of whom are doing some absolutely brilliant work in our community across Haringey. From Friends of Parks to the Multi-Faith Forum, from tenants and residents associations to school governors, I want to thank everyone who has given their time and effort to making Haringey a more equal, inclusive place where everyone has a stake. Participating in public life is a key to building community cohesion, but we know there are communities and residents in Haringey who haven't always had a voice. Everyone cares about issues that impact their community. Communities become marginalised because they are not invited to participate on their own terms. I've always championed co-production as being the best approach to creating policy and delivering services. But if we are going to reach the ambition of being a co-production council, we need to do the groundwork and ensure no community is left behind. One crucial barrier towards participation in Haringey is language. 30% of Haringey residents do not speak English as their main language, and of this 30%, 1 in 4 residents do not speak English well or at all. Since I became leader, myself and my cabinet colleagues have insisted that council consultation documents, like the Broadwater Farm consultation as an example, are printed in community languages. This is simple, but yet it took someone like me with my lived experience, whose parents are immigrants, to make this happen. I want to make lasting change to the council's culture so that the diverse needs of all of our communities are at the forefront of everything we do. We have kick-started a series of listening exercises, working with marginalised groups such as the Somali and the Turkish and Kurdish communities, creating an open dialogue so that the council has an in-depth understanding of their characteristics and needs, and that's only the beginning. And this is how we connect with communities, with the council, and more importantly, with each other as well. We already know that co-producing with residents creates better outcomes for all of us, making services more relevant, affordable and sustainable. But it's the wider picture that is most interesting and really shows how it can bring our communities together. For example, we have an ambition to make Haringey a walking and cycling borough. This is only possible if the services they need are available to residents in their local area. Through co-producing services, what is available where and how, we can utilise their lived experience to make local areas work for our residents. These 20-minute neighbourhoods created by and for the people who already live there are designed to be complete neighbourhoods. They not only reduce unnecessary travel, promote health and well-being and improve sustainability, they also decentralise city life and reconnect people with their local areas, strengthening our sense of community. Understanding our community needs and co-producing our services is key to making hyper-localism like this work. Haringey's strength is our diversity, our solidarity, and we've heard lots of examples of this tonight, and our passion for the borough where we all live. It's up to Haringey Council and us as councillors to utilise these strengths, to bring people and communities together and to work with Haringey residents and empower everyone to help build a stronger borough. And let me just finish by saying thank you to all of those who've, they're not all here tonight, but who've spent the last 4 years serving Haringey and its residents, and very good luck and best wishes to all of those who won't be back here post-May. So thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. I won't use all the time allocated, but can I just ask all colleagues who aren't standing officially and decided just to stand up, please? All colleagues who aren't standing at the election. And can we just give them all, without fear of trying to cause trouble, can we give them a round of applause, please? We all know from our own personal experiences that doing this isn't always easy. It takes a big toll on our family and our friends, and any attempt at a normal life. So irrespective of whatever political challenges or issues between each other or ways we annoy our constituents, the hours we spend in here are important and deserve to be acknowledged. I would just like to thank Councillor Mitchell for his contribution and for his wisdom and calm authority, which has often come in good use. Councillor Berryman, thank you for your service and your brutal and regular honesty. When I ran for Chief Whip at the age of 24 against Councillor Stennett, Pat simply said to me, "Sorry mate, you're too young," and I should listen to you probably, because it turned out to be not a very good idea, but there we are. That's another story. Not just honesty, but perhaps wisdom for you too, Councillor Berryman. Councillor Palmer, you got claps across the chamber tonight, so that's a very good way to go, and thank you for your passion and your loud and strong voice over the last 4 years, and particularly for your support to me as a neighbouring councillor in N8, the best and heart of our borough. Councillor Hare, we will all miss you. You're a neighbour of mine on Northview Road in Hornsey, so I feel, well, I don't live there, but you live around the corner, so I for sure I'll see you, but you'll be missed, as has been noted by everybody here, for your unique and indefatigable approach to public life. Councillor Morris, thank you too. I'm glad we could be nice now. I'm not sitting on the back benches of the Labour group where I was heckling when you were leader. It was only ever trying to be your friend, I promise. But thank you for your service to our community too. And just to say also to Rabbi Mason and to Jerry Robinson, in your different and individual ways, thank you for the contributions you make to our borough. They were both very powerful contributions indeed, but more importantly than your contributions tonight, it's the work you do in our community for our people. So thank you very much indeed. I hope colleagues found that an interesting debate. I think that was generally one of the best debates we've had in the last 4 years, because we were respectful, decent. Councillor Bacon didn't have to shout at the Lib Dems. There were no points of order either. So we end this municipal term on a good note. So thank you very much indeed. And with that, we will now move to item 12, and we are only 8 minutes behind schedule. So we are doing okay. Thank you, David. And Jerry, if you want to go home and be normal, by all means do so. We don't expect you to stay any longer. Right, agenda item 12, deputations and petitions. As part of this item, I have received one deputation which I have accepted. This is from Giovanna Iozzi. I hope where are you, Giovanna? There you are. Have I said your name correctly? Iozzi, okay. The variations of Jogi I get, let me tell you, I'm very keen to, not least from people like Mike Kakata. I like to make sure people's names are said correctly. You're representing concerned residents forming the North London Haringey Tree Protectors, who are asking the council to adopt a more nature-centred approach to its 10-year works on wildlife at Parkland Walk. Now, if you want to come forward to the microphone just in front of the man in the striped jersey. So I don't know your name, sir. And you'll have 5 minutes to make your deputation.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can I just gently suggest that we don't have any, we're not really allowed that in the chamber, and so if you don't mind, we can perhaps have a look when we leave later, just.
Quite a gentle message, but okay.
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay, bar humbug here, Scrooge. But I mean, I'm just going by what convention is.
Can you hear me okay?
No.
I'm slightly short, so.
Can you bring it a bit closer to you? Can you? David may be able to help you.
Is that better?
No.
We heard it squeak. Okay. So the stand's making some noise.
How's that? No?
I tell you what, why don't you go and stand? You see where it says Councillor Stone?
Yeah.
Why don't you go and be Councillor Stone for a minute, and you can use his microphone because it's unused and has been for a little while.
Is that okay?
Yes,
is that
great,
perfect.
Right,
okay. So I have got quite a loud voice, so. Okay, thanks. And thanks for trying to pronounce my name right. It's actually Yotzi, but you did very well, okay. I'm really excited listening tonight to this idea of co-production and retrospective co-production. So it's a real sort of buzzword going around. So I'm really hoping that perhaps with the Parkland Walk moving forward over the next 10 years, that can really be implemented, the idea of co-production with the local communities. In 2020, Haringey began a major project on the beloved nature reserve, the Parkland Walk, and will be spending an estimated £10 million over, I think, 10 years to rebuild a number of bridges, including Stanhope Road, as well as a plan to resurface the walk. While appreciating the council's intention to invest money in this unique nature reserve, sadly we feel that the work so far have been detrimental to the walk, gradually eroding and degrading its wildness and habitat. Despite Haringey announcing a climate emergency and boasting proudly in a recent letter about London's longest local nature reserve that supports a remarkable range of habitats and wildlife, we're very worried that the Parkland Walk is being encroached upon by the needs of planners over natural space instead of and not using an integrated green approach. Just to recap briefly, works to assess the bridges, which began in 2020, resulted in the felling of over 100 trees up and down the walk. As we noted at our last deputation, the work was beset by serious failings and lacked due ecological care. The walk boasts a number of tree species, including oak, cherry, field maple, silver birch, which have now been thinned out considerably. A number of trees of over 100 years old were mistakenly fell at Muswell Hill's James's Lane end. A key point we want to make is the Parkland Walk is not a park, despite its title, but a valuable green flagged nature reserve and should be nurtured and protected. Quite simply, it's a special case. We worry that the proposed bridge works will result in a further fracturing of the walk's ecological continuity as a wildlife corridor, creating a more piecemeal user experience with a number of concrete bridges dissecting it. We fear Tollington Bridge and Stanhope are setting a precedent for the rest of the works and will turn the Parkland Walk into an urban walk, quote from a petition supporter, with user needs and recreation trumping nature every time, despite, as has already been said, the deepening climate crisis. Upper Tollington Park Bridge, which has already been done, has resulted in a really bare, urbanised, ungreen design, complete with self-binding gravel with no planting or measures to increase biodiversity at all. The Stanhope Road Bridge design, which is currently being passed through, the council has granted itself permission, despite almost 200 objections, to build a bridge which is detrimental to its surroundings. Again, the current design is bare, urbanised, with a large zigzagged ramp that knocks out a swathe of trees, around 7 we think, and vegetation. Contractors, WSP, are not specialists in conservation. A project like this should be undertaken by organisations well versed in protecting and retaining wildlife reserves and natural assets. Government legislation to local authority obligations under Section 4 of the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006 places a duty on public authorities to have regard for the conservation of biodiversity when delivering their functions. The felling of trees, coupled with the spreading of inappropriate gravels, will disturb an ecosystem essential for the continued success of the nature reserve and will adversely affect priority species which rely on this existing habitat. Making the bridge higher is another issue, a meter, which will allow larger vehicles to pass underneath, creating more pollution and traffic on a residential road with a number of local schools. Let us not forget Stanhope is a minor road not served well by transport links. The key issues here is the council is, we believe, viewing the Stanhope Road Bridge as a single entity or amenity, rather than the whole of the Parkland Walk being considered as the entity amenity, and we believe this is misinterpreting planning law. There are a number of perfectly viable level access routes which could be improved without the huge loss to nature at Stanhope, such as nearby Northwood Road, Crescent Road, Holmesdale Road, all just minutes away. The council is focused on accessibility, but all these entrances could be upgraded. We believe also resurfacing the walk will result in accelerated user travel, so the walk will become a superhighway for cycles, possibly electric scooters, fast bikes, more runners, affecting the experiences of more vulnerable users of the Parkland Walk. The current surface allows for users to slowly enjoy, negotiate and contemplate, safely using the work. If these works go ahead as planned, it will become noisier, busier and a less safe haven for walkers. Moving forward, to be more positive, this is a real opportunity for genuine co-production and change. We call on Haringey Council to come up with an alternative eco-design for the Stanhope Road Bridge that puts nature first and stops more destruction of our nature reserve. The council could lead from the front with its bridge design, enhancing biodiversity in the climate crisis. I did print out some green bridges that have already been built in the country. We really need to preserve the trees we have left. Regarding the ramp, alternative routes and designs could be implemented with more thought and imagination.
Could I ask you just to wind up, please?
Yeah, sure. Let's all work together to design a park and walk plan we can all enjoy. It belongs to all of us, and the stakeholders and users should be asked for their views. There could be a consultation on how it's been going so far. This is 10 years after all. We've got a lot of time to genuinely involve the communities all over Haringey and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Just for complete clarity, I did give you more than 5 minutes, so although I wound up, I didn't close you down at any point. I don't think that's what I was trying to do. And are there any colleagues with any questions to the deputation? Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From my recollections with officers, the Stanhope Bridge that you refer to, I recollect that there are issues with disability access and equal opportunities, and that is the reason why the current design has been chosen. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a recollection that I have from recent discussions with my officers, that it is a disability and equal opportunities question that has produced the design that is proposed.
You can be Councillor Stone again.
Hi. I completely understand your point, and obviously, I think at the planning meeting, it was like all users of the park, so for disabled, for cyclists, for people with prams. But what we're saying is there are a number of other viable, very, very close routes that are already quite level and could be improved vastly. And we're questioning the size of the ramp. Could it be more integrated? Of course, we want everyone to be able to use the walk. That's not really our issue. It's more about sort of retaining and preserving the nature reserve as it is, really. But it's certainly one of the issues, yeah.
Thank you. Maybe just stay there a second, Ms. Yachts, in case anybody else. None over here? No other questions? Okay, Councillor Carter, do you want to respond to the deputation, please?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Giovanna, for that very passionate speech, and for underlining the strength of feeling in this room, but also amongst residents and community groups and campaigners for protecting our nature reserves, protecting our biodiversity, protecting our trees. And it's an important role that you play, absolutely. I'm not going to go over, as you've said, we need to look forward positively. So I'm not going to go over and necessarily spend the time countering some of the factual inaccuracies. But, I would certainly say in terms of moving forward, the council has already begun undertaking topographical surveys, penetrating route radar surveys, tree surveys, to look at the whole route of the Parkland Walk and along all the bridges to have a proper understanding of the setup and what needs to be done and what can be avoided and what needs to be protected. And I can assure you that we will make sure that these are publicly available, and that, like you say, we need to have a co-production approach to this, and that we will be taking that approach with those reports. I'd also like to say that the outcome and the plan going ahead is certainly not a done deal, and there's a lot of room for a lot of scope for change, a lot of scope for improvement and refinement. I'm going to just have one critical point, is that accessibility is essential and it is non-negotiable. Right, that is an absolute fundamental on this, is that we can protect and enhance our biodiversity and our ecology at the same time as protecting the vulnerable people of this borough and ensuring that their access is enhanced and is as equal as anyone else's. So I think we can achieve both. We must achieve both. Now you've brought to the table a very positive vision for the bridge, for the projects across, but specifically Stanhope Bridge, which is the idea of green bridges. And I think that's actually a fantastic vision and one in which we should embrace. I think, you know, green bridges, they act as wildlife overpasses for insects, for mammals, for birds. They join up habitats, they connect colonies, integrate with the surrounding environment, which is potentially one of the most important elements here, because we obviously do need to rebuild and improve the bridges and make them safe. And I think we can explore with you and with residents innovative and sustainable designs. I think we can go there, and we should go there. And through green design, we can ensure our nature reserves are protected and enhanced, whilst also being fully accessible. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Yotzi, thank you very much for your deputation. Would your colleagues like to show us all the banners so we can see what it says? It was just that I didn't want any distractions at the beginning of the debate of the deputation, but sorry, you put it away. No, there you go. Okay, well, thank you. And thank you for all the campaigning work you do, and for being the deputation tonight. I think it's important that we have as many residents actually engaging with these meetings as possible, rather than just talking to ourselves. Right, by all means stay if you'd like to for the rest of the meeting, but if you want to go home too, you can go home. And we'll move to agenda item 13. Now, in accordance with Council Standing Order 9.1, we have received 9 public questions, and we have a total time allocation of 20 minutes for public questions. 20 questions. In accordance with Council Standing Order 9.2, the number of questions will be asked in the order that they were received, and in accordance with Council Standing Order 9.5, which I feel sure all of you will know intimately, the questioner is only permitted 1 supplementary question for clarity purposes. I've been advised that 5 of the questioners are here. Presumably 5 at the front? Questioners? Yep. Are present at the meeting, and the remaining 4 will receive a written response. So is Dr. Klein there, please? Here we are. You can be Councillor Stone for tonight now, Dr. Klein. And would you like to put your question to the Cabinet Member for Customer Services, Welfare and the Public Realm?
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, I think my question is actually also about co-production in a way. On the 10th of March 2020, Cabinet considered a new CPZ policy. The report to Cabinet noted that the Secretary of State for Transport recommends that local authorities should consult on their parking policies. Yet the Cabinet decided to ignore this guidance and approve the policy as submitted. In practice, the new CPZ policy is deeply flawed, particularly with respect to the consultation process, which is insufficiently clear on many points, including who is allowed to vote and what validity checks will be undertaken. Does the Cabinet member not realise that consultation can actually lead to problems being identified and ironed out at an early stage? And will the Cabinet member explain why she thinks that the residents of this borough should be denied the voice in the formulation of policy that even this awful government thinks we're entitled to?
Thank you, Dr. Klein. Just take a seat and the Cabinet member can... Yeah. Oh, you've got to sort back, so sit if you need to, Cabinet member, if that's easier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Klein. Just for clarity, the policy document in question did not include any new developments. What it sought to do was to formalise existing process.
I became the cabinet member in 2019, and as part of my induction, I wanted someone to explain the process to me, and there was no such document, and what we had to do was look at convention. The practice has always been cited on our website and in all of our correspondence in all of the CPZs we have undertaken. However, residents and councillors wish to see the policy rather than convention, so that we all understood as residents and as councillors what the process was. So the process would be was the same prior to coming to cabinet and post coming to cabinet. As with all policies and processes, they can be reviewed and improved. And since March 2020, we have received feedback on how things could be clearer and how those points are being collated as part of the built-in review. Just to clarify, because there was no changes in the policy, our legal advice was that we didn't need to go to statutory consultation, because all we were doing was formalising existing convention and process. So I hope that explains that.
Dr. Klein, you have a supplementary? Just one though.
Well, I understand what the cabinet member is saying, but just because the policy is existing doesn't mean it's correct. And it's quite clear that there are changes and improvements that could be made. And I would urge the cabinet member to consider how a new policy could be co-produced with residents.
I totally agree.
There you are, Dr. Klein. That sounds like a cup of tea for the diary. So that's a good commitment and answer for you. Thank you very much indeed. I'll say it to you, but I don't need to say it to everybody else. If once you've done your questions, if you choose to go, that's fine. Thank you very much for engaging. Right, next question is Michael Williamson. Hi, Michael. Your turn to be Councillor Stone. So just press just once. Yeah,
great. Press the magic button, is that it? Okay.
You're quiet.
Yeah. In a cabinet meeting on March the 10th, 2020, it was agreed as part of the new CPZ policy, and I understand that it's being said that this isn't new, but it was made policy, whereas before it was just practice. It was agreed that a sub-area of the wider consultation area could be selected if the majority of those responding in that area favoured parking controls. Given that this was not the case during the previous consultation in November 2017, why was this vitally important change of policy not made clear to residents in the questionnaire used in the current Hornsey North consultation? And I do claim that this is in fact a change in that it wasn't the practice with the previous consultation.
Should we just follow the same format? So
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question, Mr. Williamson. So, as I've said previously, nothing has changed in the process that you referred to in 2017 and the process now. We do see when we do the initial consultation, and it's a design consultation, the public consultation is a design consultation, we do see cluster of roads that support and cluster of roads that do not support. And so that's part of our co-designing process. I wish we could be looser, but we are governed by the Road Traffic Act and various other acts that are out there that control parking. So the first thing that we do when we go out to public consultation is firstly test if there is a support for a CPZ, and then establish where that support is. The next stage is we start to hone in on where the support is, and for people that said that they didn't want it would then subsequently not be part of the ongoing process. So that's how we create what you've called sub areas and what I've called clusters. So if you look back on various CPZs that have happened over the last 5 years, you would see the initial proposal was quite wide, and then you start to see the proposal that actually went to statutory consultation was modified and changed based on the feedback from the residents before. However, we obviously have not made that process clear enough, and we need to explain what happens at each consultation stage. But in answer to your wider question, the Hornsey North responses, if that's what the results show that residents want, we'll see a sub area if we see the results are coming in clusters like that. And that's why we ask the questions we do to establish where the need is and where the want is.
Supplementary.
Right, I understand what you're saying there, but in the recent consultation, the majority of residents were not in favour of a CPZ. So given that this wasn't made clear, that there was no indication that they might be foisted with a sub-area, if the council were to propose such a sub-area, would it not be democratic to check whether those residents within that area are in fact in favour of something which is quite different from what they were originally consulted on?
I'm assuming just from the written version of your question that I have that you're referring to the Hornsey North area.
Correct, yes.
And my understanding is that we are yet to publish the results of that.
Correct. I'm saying that should the council propose a sub-area, would it not be democratic to actually ask the people within that sub-area whether they do want that? Because they were actually consulted on something else, namely an entire area.
Right, I understand the question. So in the next stage, if there was some roads that agreed to do it, and then they will go to the next stage, which is also a consultation, where that consultation is statutory. And at that stage, they can voice their objections.
And those objections would be taken into account?
As part of the statutory process.
Mr. Williamson, I can't really allow back and
Okay.
forth. I've got to try and be fair. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But I feel sure that the cabinet member will include you to the cup of tea with Dr. Klein. Brian, another meeting, another appearance. Welcome. Brian Bowles.
There we go, mic on, lovely. Good evening, councillors. Now, surprisingly, this question relates to the North Hornsey CPZ consultation. The consultation ended on the 23rd of March 2021. Haringey's consultation charter states, at the end of the consultation, we will communicate what will happen next, when the results of the consultation will be published, when and by whom the decisions on the proposals will be taken, and when the decisions will be published. It is now almost 12 months since the completion of the consultation, and the entire area of over 30 roads is still awaiting formal acceptance of the result of the consultation by the council and notification of the same. Not only did the council fail in the above commitments, requests to councillors for this information have either gone unanswered or were answered without including the information detailed above. To date, we have no timetable and no decision. Does the representative councillor agree that in the case of the North Hornsey CPZ consultation, Haringey Council has failed lamentably to honour its commitments as laid out in the consultation charter?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles, and lovely to meet you in real life. So I emailed you over the weekend, and I know we've exchanged some emails today as well. I think the first thing to say is that that consultation document that you presented has been presented to me before, and I think one of the things we need to do is to make things clearer about consultation on our website. So there are some consultations that are in our gift in terms of how we want to work with people, and that can be modelled quite freely. And as you've heard the leader and the deputy leader speak quite frequently about co-production today. And then there are some consultations like the ballot on Broadwater Farm and like CPZs that are kind of governed by different rules and regulations. And so under the Road Traffic Act, we have to make sure that we are in legal with the statutory consultation as laid out with them. So just to go back to some of your other points, firstly, I agree this has gone on too long. And my inbox probably can't take any more, so I want it over as fast as you do, trust me. Unfortunately, we have hit 2 pre-election periods. We had one with the GLA, and we've got one coming up now. What I can say to you is that some CPZ results are pretty straightforward, and I can imagine how frustrating it is for you to see the Alexandra CPZ start after yours and then get announced before yours, and that's quite frustrating. I can tell you that the Alexandra CPZ was probably one of the most straightforward CPZs ever that we've ever seen, and that was easier to kind of declare quite fast and swiftly. However, it still does need to come to Cabinet in June. And some are complicated and some are, and I'm choosing my words carefully, are wildly complicated. And so complications can occur for different reasons. So for example, in a CPZ area that has a really long road, you might see some people on one end of the road that want a CPZ and people on the other end don't want a CPZ for whatever reason. Some people might for example, be closer to a car-free development, and so they're feeling some pressure and other people are not feeling the pressure. Some people might be close to a Homes for Haringey estate, and as you know, they're entitled to CPZs, but you're not entitled to park on their estate. And some people might be closer to a school or a transport hub. So there are various reasons that things can come quite complicated. And because we are running CPZs by consent and by designing them with residents, we have to absorb that consultation and redesign and relook at things again and again. I always make sure, and it's part of our process, that we engage ward councillors, and ward councillors need to give me a steer about where they feel we need to go with certain things that have come out of the consultation, because they are elected and they have the mandate in the ward. So what I will say is that we now have hit another pre-election period. However, today I can let you know that we are, and I've written a statement, it's on the website, it's on headed paper. I will send it to you just in case we take it off the website, so you still have a copy. I will email it to you today, is that we're announcing the results and what the next steps are in June after this election period. What I also will say to you is that my inbox is full of people that love CPZs or hate CPZs. They're like the Marmite of local government. But when the results come out, most people, it reflects their view and they understand why some residents have wanted it and some don't. And I feel that that would be the case with Hornsey North in this case. But I apologise again because it has taken a long time and it's been wildly complicated.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Chandwani. My supplementary: should not the Charter, which was the original question, include a clause which says that consultations should be impartial? The recent CPZ consultations have all been heavily biased towards the addition of CPZ areas. Will the council, in the drafting and wording of any further consultations, make use of the services of an independent arbiter to ensure the impartiality of the consultation?
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. I think there's some really good suggestions there, but it'd be wrong of me to accept them here. And as part of the inbuilt review, there are things we've got to look at. The language of CPZ consultations has obviously been misunderstood. This is the first time, I think, in 4 years, so many people have used their right to ask a question. So as part of that review, it could be that we have an arbiter, but it could be that we don't, and we look at how the language is used and that it doesn't feel so biased going forward.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is Peter Pearce here before I call Lindsay? That's what I was trying to work out, but wasn't sure because I didn't think you were Peter. So, Lindsay, and then what's your name, madam? Adele. Yeah, grand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have been informed by the council officers following a Freedom of Information request that the justification for the Hornsey North consultation on whether to introduce a CPZ was in response to a mere 2 verifiable requests from local residents. The parking projects manager cited requests by phone and conversations between residents and ward councillors as further justification, but no formal record made of these. As such, any such conversation should be seen as hearsay and with little or no validity in the formal process. Does this not show that the Hornsey North CPZ consultation was not resident-led, but rather council-led, which is contrary to the council's own climate action plan, which is to roll out resident-led CPZ programme?
Thank you, Ms. Fowler. Firstly, one of the things that I'm hearing quite strongly by the fact that you had to put in an FOI to get this information is that that information should be readily available in the first place. There's no need for anybody to put in an FOI for such basic information, and that's one of the first things that I think we need to be really open and transparent about. The second thing is, I agree with you. So as I said earlier, I became a cabinet member in May 2019, and I felt that we needed to keep records of these requests and that they needed to be formalised, and that started from September 2019. It should have started in May 2019 when I first asked, but there's not really CPZs that happen during the summer period. So it happened pretty promptly on my watch to make sure that we keep those records formalised. Just to give a bit more of an explanation, we do get people, believe it or not, who do write to us, sometimes petition us and say they would love a CPZ. And that does happen. Some people don't believe it happens. My brother is one of the people that are campaigning in to make it happen. So there are different reasons for it. Sometimes we get residents who informally have that conversation with us, and I think we need to formalise those conversations. Otherwise, you're right, it does become hearsay. But what they do is they phone us up and they say to us, that community centre down the road is having another wedding again and I can't park, or the school kids are being picked up by their parents again and I can't park. And so they're the sort of intel that we're getting, and I think we need to be clearer about what's intel and what's request. And the other place that requests come from is councillors, and as a ward councillor as well, I have relayed concerns from residents to officers. So the process of recording that has been tightened from September 2019, but I hear we need to tighten it a bit more and make sure that it's just published, because we've got nothing to hide and we should put it out there. What I will say though is, in some senses, it doesn't matter how many people request it, because we will never go ahead with it without asking everyone first, and that's the part of the first consultation. And as you saw in Alexandra, and as you've seen in Wood Green CPZ more recently, is that if people have said no, the process stops. So in some, you could have 3 people that really want a CPZ, but if 50 other people come back and say they don't want it, then that's the process. It stops. It doesn't hit the 50% threshold. What I also will say is that whether we introduce a threshold, so some people might feel you need a petition of 10 people to be able to trigger off a process. Some people might say it needs to be 2% of the area. It's something that we can discuss when we do the review stage. But I don't think it makes a difference in this case, because I feel that whatever happens, wherever the requests come from, how many of there are, we're not going on to move to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage and implementation without first asking every single household in the area whether they want to go ahead with it or not. So I hope that responds to your question.
Not really, no, because it's interesting that you say that the questions, the complaints come via the councillors, because I have been in contact with all of the councillors in the area, and of the 2 that bothered to get back to me, both of them said, one of them said that they'd had 5 requests since 2017, and the other one said it was less than 5. The other councillors haven't bothered to get back to me, so I can only assume that it wasn't many, because they would have said, God, yeah, we've had loads. So I can't believe that it's resident-led. I think it's part of the agenda for Haringey Council to roll it out borough-wide regardless.
Can I have a question, or just because?
You can have a question, yeah.
The guillotines. No, it's not for me. I can't.
All right.
Case, but I mean,
what my question is would you therefore say that it is actually not resident-led? Because there haven't really been that many complaints.
No, I wouldn't, because as I've already stated, and as I've given 2 really recent examples, is before we go ahead, we do a consultation with every single householder in the zone, and if they want it, we go ahead, and if they don't, we don't. And I think the 2 recent ones of where people have said that they don't is really good examples showing that it could be resident-led both ways, either going ahead or not.
Yeah. But my question is,
Lindsay,
why is the
no,
consultation
sorry.
in the first place? Go on a couple of things.
Look, clearly there's going to be a need here for a cup of tea with the relevant people. So let's have that proper chat in person rather than back and forth, because Adele needs to ask her question. Then we've got more questions on the agenda pack. Thank you.
I have to agree with there, Lindsay. I don't think you actually answered that last question of Lindsay's. So this is from Peter Pearce. He tested positive this morning for COVID, so I'm reading his question. The CPZ policy adopted by the Council in 2020 states that a 10% response rate is considered adequate and that 51% of that 10% respondents in favour is sufficient for the Council to implement a CPZ. This means that barely more than 5% of households could trigger a CPZ. My street is trying to organise a street party and has been informed from the council that they require 70% of households to agree before permission will be granted for the street party. Does this mean that a council believes that a one-day party will have 14 times more impact on residents than a placement of a permanent CPZ?
Thank you. Adele, I didn't get your surname, so I hope you don't mind me addressing you with your Pearson. Firstly, I think it's a really reasonable point, well made, and I think we need to have consistency. I think we need to have more street parties because I think that they do really good things for the community. They have a sense of community cohesion, a sense of civic pride, and they grow resilience in the neighbourhoods. And I think that unless you know your neighbours, you wouldn't have been able to help them in a time like COVID, like we just saw. I think I want to go further than consistency because I want to be proportionate. And I think a one-day street party versus a 5-year CPZ shouldn't even be equal. It should be a lot more easier to have a street party. I have spoken to officers since this question has come in and said that 70% is absolutely ludicrous, and it's something that we need to be promoting a lot more and helping residents have that community space and use the streets not for vehicles but for people. And this 70% has gone completely against our ethos and our ethics, and so this will be reviewed straight away.
There isn't in effect, 5 households out of 10 out of 100 households. Do you think that's the right number to implement a CPZ to start it off in the first place? 5 out of 100 households. So
I think that everybody has the opportunity to participate, and it's the democratic process. So every one of those households has the opportunity, and we can't make it mandatory for them to come back. So we set this threshold.
Yeah, but you set a very low threshold so that you can start that process in the first place. If you made the threshold higher, yeah. And
sorry,
more fair.
Adele, we can't. I'm sorry.
I'll do my supplementary question then. Okay,
Please.
so Richmond Council. Richmond Council insists on a 30% response threshold for consultations. Would it not be more fair and representative and democratic for Haringey Council to apply the same figure, or at the very least, put its CPZ policy consultation as recommended by the State of Secretary of State for Transport, i.e. have a higher threshold in the first place before you start it off, because your 5 households out of 100 households is what's getting the ball rolling, and that's what you want.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There is nothing wrong with us reviewing the threshold. What we have chosen to do just prior to COVID, and just to make everyone really clear about the timeline to this, we managed to formalise all of the existing practices and conventions the week before we went into lockdown, and we haven't had any consultations until the last kind of year, and now we're starting to see all of that come ahead. I think now what the bonus is of everyone seeing the policy and understanding the policy is that now they want to see changes in it, and that's part of the iterative process. And so as part of the review, the inbuilt review, that's already in the policy, that if we need to change them, and it needs to be that significant change, if it's a significant change, we need to go out to consultation on that change, and if it isn't a significant change and there are tweaks, we can do that through the process. But changing something like the threshold for me would be a significant change and something we can go out to consultation as part of the review process.
So what sort of timings do you think you're looking at that?
Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to have to stop this conversation now. We can have a proper chat at some point in person, but there just isn't the mechanism in the rules to allow the back and forth. I'm sorry, but thank you very much, and best wishes to Peter having caught the virus today. Right. We now have to move to councillor questions. I have accepted the responses to written questions submitted as late business earlier. Can we please agree to receive the written responses as set out in the table papers that colleagues have got? Right. Now, just to say, the whips have, on both sides, have agreed that we will ditch supplementary questions as we try to catch up on, I don't want to get sick, Councillor, on timing. So let's go to question 1, Councillor Dennison.
Mr. Mayor, could we have a short conference break, a couple of minutes, maybe?
Reg, I just. Do you need to use the top? Yeah, if you need to go to the bathroom, by all means. Pardon? Well, I need to empty my bladder, but we haven't got the means to leave yet. So I think we'll crack on and go to Councillor Dennison, shall we? And if colleagues do need to leave, we have been here a long time. Please do it quietly and, you know, so as not to disrupt the business, so we can keep going. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that questions are important, but I think we have 2 very important motions on the table tonight. So I'd like to propose that we close section, item 13 and move to item 14, if that is acceptable to all of the question.
Well, is that agreed? Sorry, that's a formal motion. We need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I suggest that if that's the approach that members want to pursue, then there should be written replies which are published to the questions, the open questions that we don't reach tonight.
Yes, I think that's what happens, isn't it, if we don't reach them? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so that's agreed. So we'll move to item 14. Yeah, that's agreed. Okay, item 14. We have 2 motions for consideration. I'll ask Councillor Palmer to propose her motion first, motion G, and then once she's spoken for up to 5 minutes, I'll ask the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to respond. Now, just to warn colleagues that I don't want the same debate we had last time. We've now started agenda item 14. The business will be concluded even if that takes us beyond the 10 o'clock deadline of the meeting. So we don't, the one person actually is, Councillor Weiss, you're still here, but we are, we will finish the business on this item. So there'll be none of the guillotine thing or suspending standing orders. Okay, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought my last speech would be a different one. I thought it would be one of my normal political speeches, but it turns out that it's not. It's a speech that I give where I finally get to tell you who I really am. And I hope that this explains why this motion means so much to me. I spent most of my childhood in foster care. I was taken into emergency care when I was 18 months old and adopted just before I turned 18. Saying those words out loud 44 years on is still really hard, and there are lots of complex reasons for that. But one of the things that I've had to deal with for my whole life is other people's perceptions of me. The most common things that I hear when I tell anybody about myself are, oh, I would never have known. You don't look like somebody that grew up in care. You don't sound like somebody who grew up in care. My personal favourite, you seem really intelligent. You cannot have grown up in care. I became aware that I was different when I was just 6. My social worker asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I told her I wanted to be the Prime Minister or an archaeologist. And kindly, she told me, children like you don't do jobs like that. It was something that I heard throughout my childhood from adults, that I would fail. The expectations for me were very low. Once at school, some marbles went missing from a coat pocket. I probably don't need to tell you whose bag they searched first. We used to get changed in the classroom for PE, and for what are probably very obvious reasons, I did not want to undress in public. When I cried, I was told that I was being difficult. I didn't have any friends. Funnily enough, kids don't want to play with a foster kid. And I would hear things like, you've got no mum and dad, you weirdo. I was never once invited to a birthday party, and I never had a birthday party myself. because I had no one to invite. It was extraordinarily lonely. The first time that I took a piece of cut glass to my wrist, I was 9 years old. The thought of this being my life forever, the loneliness, the relentless bullying, and a sense of absolute hopelessness was too much. And it was something that I had to battle silently throughout my whole childhood. Now, I was lucky, I got to go to university, but of course it went wrong. My relationship at home broke down and I ended up presenting myself as homeless when I was 19. And I was put into completely unsuitable and unsafe accommodation. But I'm here today as a grown woman with a professional career, a home, a family, the things I thought people like me couldn't have. But I've spent most of my life lying about who I am. You know, you meet people, they ask things like, what do your parents do? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to university? I smile, I nod, I try and change the subject, but it is exhausting. I avoid healthcare services or anywhere else that I might feel exposed. I spent my whole pregnancy terrified that somebody would find out about my background, assume I would be a bad parent and take my baby away. Now, you'd think that those perceptions and stereotypes might have changed throughout my life, but they really haven't. Recently, I heard a group of individuals talking about some looked after children that might be coming to live near them. Oh, we don't want kids like that here. They'll be into drink and drugs. They'll smash our car windows. They'll put a brick through the house windows. We don't want those kinds of kids near our kids. I will leave you to imagine how it feels to have to hear those things being said, but they're not unusual. A recent report by the Independent Children's Home Association shows that children in care homes are treated like criminals rather than victims. Some of the most recent objections to care home comments include things like, the children's challenging behaviour will disrupt the current residential nature of our road and will pose significant risk to neighbours. The plan would harm residents' peace, tranquility and health. One application for a children's home in Derby was withdrawn after over 100 objections were lodged. But what hope do we have, quite frankly, when society views us in this way? Why don't we deserve to have peace, tranquility and good health? Why don't we matter? I didn't ask for my life. I carry the physical scars. I see them every day. I have to deal with the emotional trauma for the rest of my life. People who are care experienced deserve better. We're underrepresented in every profession. We are rarely ever asked for our feedback or input into policies that affect us. It's okay for people to use offensive language to describe us and to discriminate against us. When I got elected 4 years ago, it probably meant more to me than most other people, because I promised my 6-year-old self that one day I would be brave enough to tell my story, that I would talk about why people like me matter. So I'm asking you to support this today. I want you to help me call out and challenge the misconceptions that people have about people like me. It's not easy, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But I think if we agree to listen, to learn and to understand, I have real hope that we'll make things better for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So proud, I have to say, to be following my colleague and my friend, Councillor Palmer, to second this motion, and I've no doubt that we're all incredibly proud of her too. The Show Us You Care Too campaign, led by the Together Trust, are lobbying for care experienced people to become the 10th protected characteristic under the Equality Act. It is only by centring the experiences of those who have lived this in our conversations and in our decision making that we can really begin to understand why this matters so much. That is why I'm grateful to people like Tammy, as well as others who have continued to share their stories and push for change. But it's not just the stories that they share. It's also there are also some really difficult statistics that we need to contend with as well that underpin why this matters. Government statistics show that care leavers are 3 times more likely to not be in education, employment or training than other young people. In 2017, 40% of care leavers aged 19 to 21 were not in education, employment or training either, compared to 13% of that age group in the general population. 25% of homeless people have been at care at some point, and premature death is even considered to be much more likely among people who grew up in care as children. We must not be led to believe that because of these statistics that children in care are somehow by default bad people, or that they can never succeed, because we know that's not true. The way we need to view this is by understanding that our society has failed to make the adequate adjustments to support them. And failing to understand that, they face significant barriers that many of us simply do not. They face discrimination across society, in the housing market and even in employment, and much more. Only through proper recognition of the systemic discrimination and the barriers they face can we start to have a proper conversation about how we can do better in supporting care leavers. This will be an important first step. Whilst the government's eyes are on children's social care due to the McAllister review, which is underway at the moment, we can highlight the need for change and for the rights of care experienced people. I also think today we can send a message of unity and a message that we take our responsibility seriously. Please support our motion and show them you care too.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. There's no amendment, but I've had an indication that 2 people wish to speak. So are there any others who wish to contribute to this? Yeah, I've got you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Chandwani.
Maybe that's not a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a care leaver on this side of the chamber, I felt it was necessary for me to speak. I was raised by my dad after a messy divorce, and when he passed away, I was taken into care at 14. My first placement, I was in Tottenham. My first placement was in Croydon. I was at Hornsey School for Girls sitting my GCSEs. Some social worker thought placing me in Croydon was best in my best interest. It wasn't. This was systematically setting me up. My second placement was in Hounslow. I can tell you that that is also nowhere near Hornsey. I ran away a lot. I bumped the trains to get to school. I was taken off roll. My head teacher had to pay for my lunch and give me travel money because he didn't want me to get in trouble. I set exams that I wasn't enrolled in. And on GCSE day, I can't explain how hard it was that everybody got an envelope with their name on it, but because I wasn't on roll, I did not. I lost my college place. I finally returned to live with relatives in Southgate, but that broke down. And I ended up homeless. Heathrow Airport and now Oliver Tambo Park, which is now called, but then it was called Albert Rec, were my homes. It was Bernie Grant who got me my first leaving care set of rights. Nobody explained that to me. And it was Councillor Diakides who helped me with my first flat that I currently live in. Haringey paid my rent while I went to university. They paid for basic furniture. I didn't even have light bulbs, let alone a bed or a sofa. And here I am today, making sure that I give you as much of a headache as I possibly can in the time that I'm in this chamber. But I know my life could have been different, and many care leavers don't have good head teachers, don't have good youth workers, and don't have a good MP. I was lucky. Young people shouldn't be lucky. Young people should be protected and supported. Young people should make sure that every single service that is there to raise them does so in their best interest. I do believe in this motion. I believe that young people who are care leavers are an oppressed group. And I hope that everybody on both sides of this chamber stroke sports hall does support this motion. I do want to thank Councillor Palmer. I think it was very brave of her to speak today, and I've still got goosebumps, but also resonated with a lot of what she said. And as a 43-year-old, I still flinch every time I hear people talk about care leavers. And it's not because I feel ashamed, it's because I feel like I haven't done enough to change the system. And I know on many occasions outside the old Civic Centre, pre-COVID, before the online meetings, me and her used to sit down and have wild plans of how we were going to show social workers that actually we're care leavers, and this is what you can make sure that the young people you work with could become. But sadly, we now come to the end of this political term, and we didn't get the opportunity to do that. And sadly, Councillor Palmer is not returning, and it's up to the electorate whether I will return. but I hope that she does keep in touch with Haringey and that we still do that piece of work we promised each other at the back of the Civic Centre 2 years ago.
Councillor Poku.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this motion, but I felt compelled to do that due to comments and speeches from colleagues. So thank you, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Ross, and Councillor Chanwani for sharing your stories. As a corporate parent and also a member of the Corporate Parents Committee, I welcome this motion and I'm in agreement that the council needs to work more closely with looked after children to support them and their families, ensuring what happened to Councillor Ross's mother and sibling does not happen to other vulnerable children. Councillor Weston isn't here this evening, but when she was a cabinet member and I served on the corporate parenting committee with her, we actually highlighted what collaboration meant and how listening to young people works. We had several examples. One example was just a young man who was in care, and he had always heard about how somebody in care could get just gym membership. And he kept on going on and on about it. And we actually listened to him, worked with Fusion, and managed to get gym memberships and I think it's now in place for all people that are looked after, which is great. We also had a story of another care leaver, and the council has a duty to actually house the care leavers when they reach age 18 or above. And we actually found out from the stories that were shared with us that when they do have a property that is available to view, they actually group the care leavers with other residents as well. And it's quite daunting just for anybody, but somebody who is such a young age is even more daunting from them. So listening to her story, we worked with Homes for Haringey, and we actually have a system in place where the care leaver actually has first view on their own not with other residents that are looking for homes, but they actually get a chance to actually look at the property, given a day or at least some time beforehand to actually decide whether they want to move that property or not. So we did work with them as well, and again, listen to the needs of the young people that are being looked after. There's a charter in place as well. Again, that's actually something that's been written collaboratively by the young people as well, and we need to continue working closely with them. So I actually look forward to more of these examples and the council working more closely with children under care and support them in the best way that we can. So I hope we can all support this motion.
Okay, the leader wants to speak and then we'll move to vote.
Thank you. I'm going to keep this brief and just really wanted to say big thank you to Councillor Palmer and Councillor Chanwani. It's not easy to share such personal stories in front of all of us, despite how well we know you. So thank you very much. And actually just to see the two amazing women you are is just so hopeful, and I know will give inspiration to so many young people. I'm not going to say any more than that because I think you've said it all. I think we can all get behind this motion tonight. And Mr. Mayor, if I can suggest a recorded vote, one where we all rise and make sure that our vote is recorded, I'd like to suggest that, and I hope everyone's in agreement.
So we need at least 8 colleagues to rise to support the leader's call. Yeah, supporting children in care, which should be unanimous, I think. Okay, yep, that's more than 8. Thank you very much. We'll now move to, excuse me, Councillor Palmer, you have a minute to respond if you like.
Thank you. I'm going to be super quick, so I want to ensure that we hear the final motion. Thank you is all I have to say, really. I wish I could go back in time and tell my 6-year-old self that I would do it. I'm not quite sure she would believe me, but I did. And yeah, if that's all I've achieved in my 4 years, that's what I really wanted to do. So please take this forward. Please don't think that being a corporate parent isn't important. Please don't think that it ends this evening. It's just the start of this fight. And I would really love this council to be one of the first, I think we are actually, to do this as a motion. I'd really like us to encourage others in their next administrations to champion this and make sure that care experienced people really do become the next protected characteristic. Seema, thank you for sharing. I've really missed our chats actually. I promise you I won't be going anywhere. I promise you we'll get that piece of work done. But thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. All right, let's now move to a vote. A recorded vote was requested, more than 8 members voted in support, so we will now go to Aisha to call us all individually.
Councillor Ajay.
4. And can I just ask colleagues to rise when they vote, please, so we can see and hear them? Thank you.
4.
Councillor Ahmet.
4.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor Berryman.
4.
Councillor Bevan.
4.
Councillor Barbara Blake.
4.
Councillor Bull.
4.
Councillor Carlin.
4.
Councillor Corley Harrison.
Unequivocally so, 4.
Councillor Chamwani.
4.
Councillor Shano.
4.
Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Carverwell.
Overwhelmingly 4.
Councillor Dennison.
4.
Councillor Diakides.
4.
Councillor Dixon.
4.
Councillor Doan.
4.
Councillor Ejiofor.
4.
Councillor Emery.
4.
Councillor Gordon.
4.
Councillor Guinness.
4.
Councillor Hakata.
4.
Councillor Hare.
4.
Councillor Hinchcliffe.
4.
Councillor Ibrahim.
4.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
Councillor Morris.
4.
Councillor Opoku.
4.
Councillor Palmer.
4.
Councillor Rice.
4.
Councillor Ross.
4.
Councillor Say.
4.
Councillor Stennett.
4.
Councillor Tucker.
4.
Councillor White.
4.
Councillor Williams.
4.
And Councillor Jogi.
4. Liz, just turn your mic off for us. Thanks.
So that's 37 for the motion.
Thank you. Pat, just turn your mic off for us, please. Okay, that motion is passed. Well done. As we have a second motion, part of item 14, we could in theory go on all night, so we'll now move on to the second motion before us this evening. Deputy the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll keep this very brief because of time. So just to introduce this, I think it just needs to be made clear that the cost of living crisis that we're in, and specifically the energy price crisis we are about to enter, is not a natural phenomenon. It is a product of mismanagement, of cronyism, of corruption. The energy prices is about price gouging and about price fixing, nothing more. The best way we can actually solve this is to get rid of the Tories. But in the meantime, we need to obviously act locally and to protect our residents. So this motion, one, it does call on, major changes to the way that energy is managed in this country, and one of those possibilities, obviously, that we need to explore and argue for is for nationalisation. But we, locally in Haringey, we need to make sure that there is support. We've got zero carbon house building programme, our retrofit programme, which is about insulating our 17,000 council homes so that we can protect the poorest people, who are the ones that are disproportionately affected by this crisis. So I'll just leave it there and hope that you will support this motion.
You formally moved it. Yes. Thank
Please
you.
move. Yeah.
Right. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm very pleased to second this motion. In the real world, British families are about to endure the worst cost of living crisis for 30 years. And they are left waiting for anyone in power to notice this. For many, the money going out is about to soar, causing that money that's coming in to shrink in real terms. We can read the script, we know. Inflation is now at over 5%, pricey of food and clothes, energy tariffs are escalating, tax bills are set to go up, and at the same time, the £20 universal credit uplift has been cut, and unemployment benefits are about to hit their lowest real value in more than 3 decades. And this is what experts today are calling that people will be living only slightly more than destitution. Ministers can claim that work is the solution, but it is good jobs, as Councillor Carter has said, not any job that is a reprieve. And let's not forget that the majority of people living in poverty are in working households. The official line may be that the pandemic is over, but this too is still hitting personal finances. And let's just ask vulnerable pensioners who have been shielding or sitting in cold homes. Let's just ask the families who are having to make a decision between heating their home and eating. So please support the proposal set out in the motion, which Councillor Carter outlined. It's very important that we support this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. We've received an amendment in accordance with Council standing orders, which will be moved by Councillor Emery and I believe seconded by Councillor Dennison. So, Councillor Emery, you have 5 minutes and Councillor Dennison has 3.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This energy and cost of living crisis has been a crisis created by the Tory party. Inflation has been spiralling out of control for months. They have failed to create the green infrastructure needed for years, and I'm sure that we can all agree that they've never given a damn about helping the poorest people in our country. Between 2010 and 2015, despite a difficult financial situation, the coalition government managed to triple renewable energy output. Since then, the pace has slowed as the Tories show their lack of ambition, cutting investments in renewables and selling the Green Investment Bank. That cowardly penny pinching on the progress needed is now hitting our country hard. But let's talk about right now. How has Rishi Sunak responded to
Yeah. It's all right. I was on the phone to Jackie.
Oh right. This is Jackie Diva style. So. Excuse me, madam. If you can hear me, this is the mayor calling. Can you hear me? Hello, whoever was speaking to Jennifer Hall today. Can you hear us? Okay, Councillor Emery. Oh, she's still there. How can we disconnect? Oh, sorry, Councillor, is that a point of order?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I was going to say that the individual muted if they are logged on online.
Yeah, so I said I don't really understand. I don't know.
Sorry about this.
And bearing in mind I've been in the party.
We're getting the full experience today, folks. We never get guests and seeing or cameos.
This is kind of weird.
I'm going to have to start my speech all over again, I'm afraid.
No, I quite agree. So start again.
No,
and I've reset my clock as well, Councillor Henry.
I'll restart in the paragraph I'm on. Okay, let's talk about right now. How has Rishi Sunak responded to increasing energy bills? Alone, giving with one hand and taking back with the other in a few years' time. And this scheme uses the council tax system, a notoriously unfair way of helping, meaning that some families who don't pay council tax or are unfortunate enough to live in homes that are categorised as Band E based on 1991 valuations get nothing. It's clear that Rishi Sunak has failed millions of families who are facing this cost of living crisis. He could have done what the Liberal Democrats proposed on the 5th of January. He could have demanded that the fossil fuel giants did their bit to help out. They rake in unbelievable profits while our costs surge. Our Robin Hood windfall tax would raise the cash so that we can cut our residents' energy bills now. But no, not Rishi. He's protecting his mates in those big companies. While this country needs an emergency budget from the Treasury to combat this cost of living crisis, here in Haringey, we need to respond to this current emergency too. That's why I propose that we don't just reference the plans we've had to fix this issue a few years back when it wasn't so bad. Things have become far more urgent. And that's why I'm suggesting we bring forward our important plans to insulate our council homes by 5 years and insulate our own buildings a year earlier. We need to react to this desperate situation facing our residents as soon as possible. Accelerating these timeframes will make a significant difference to families struggling to afford to heat their homes. On top of this, we need to be transparent. We need to make sure that the action the council has taken against rogue landlords that aren't fulfilling their energy obligations has been up to scratch. Without it, we have no idea if the council is dealing with this problem. Please, release that information now so that we can show that we aren't deserting renters. Alongside this, we need to improve the transparency and detailed tracking of our council home efficiencies. We need an annual report from Homes of Haringey showing that the EPC ratings and how they change year on year. Yes, it's important that we send a signal to government, telling them they need to be better, but we can do more too. Please vote for this amendment so we can truly react to this emergency and respond to this cost of living crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The cost of living and particularly energy costs has been a growing issue ever since the financial crisis back in 2008. For most of that time, wages have struggled to keep a pace with inflation, leaving more and more ordinary people struggling. We all know the long-term solutions: better insulated homes, a shift away from fossil fuels which destroy our environment and help to bankroll despotic regimes. But of course, that doesn't help people here and now. Across the Channel, the French government is forcing EDF to keep bills at a manageable level for consumers. Here, Tory inaction means that EDF are raising their bills by a whopping 54%. Clearly, the answer is that it's to force energy giants who continue to make huge profits to take some responsibility. Labour and the Liberal Democrats have been united in calling for a windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas, a common sense proposal that I'm sure we can all support in this chamber. What we should not be doing is what has been put forward by the right-wing Tories, scrapping green energy levies and funding for home insulation, and that they should try to leverage the current humanitarian crisis to support their ongoing crusade against climate change science is despicable as it is boneheaded. We must make sure that this motion does more, however, to just condemn the Conservatives, however much this may be justified and slightly exciting. That's why we have put forward an achievable, if challenging, amendment focused on what the council can do to ensure that our residents aren't put in such an invidious position again. I hope you support it.
Thank you. Very good, well within time, thanks. 3 people have indicated they wish to speak. We'll go to Councillor Ibrahim first.
Oh, thank you, Chair. this is a really important issue, and I think it's really important to talk about what inflation looks like for, you know, in reality for real people. And you'll hear about, you know, percentages that economists talk about, but that's not the reality for most of the families that we represent. It was Jack Monroe actually who recently wrote an amazing and very truthful trail of tweets about the real cost of inflation. So if last year you could walk into a supermarket and buy a packet of pasta for 29 pence, but this year when you walk in it's 70 pence, that's not 5% inflation. That's over 100%. Actually, it's around 144%. When we're talking about energy bills, the reality is a lot of the families that we represent use prepayment meters, and the rising cost of energy means that it's not that they're going to pay a larger bill at the end of the month. It means that their electricity or their gas is going to finish in 3 days rather than 5 days, and they're going to be constantly having to top it up. And we all know that prepayment is the most expensive way of heating your home. But that is a reality for many families because they're on a budget. They don't want themselves to get into debt. I always talk about my own experience, and you know, I remember as a child, my mother used to put the 50 pence into the meter. It was her way of budgeting. It was her way of making sure she wasn't in debt, and she was able to manage it that way. But the reality is, for a lot of people, that's becoming unmanageable. And you know, when you walk into supermarkets, and I see it, you know, a couple of years ago, you know, you would see a loaf of bread for, or you would see a tin of beans for 13 pence. Where those are available now, those shelves are often cleared because, you know, the goodness of our, you know, the community-minded nature of people during the pandemic means that, you know, low-income families are competing with good-minded people who want to buy those products to donate to food banks, and those products are becoming increasingly unavailable for everybody. There are supermarkets that do not have those lines anymore, that do not run the Savers brands, and often it's the lowest quality food as well. So let's talk about inflation and what it means to real people's purses. Not 5%. In reality, for most families, it's a lot more than that. And my final point is going to be, it doesn't actually affect the most well-off in the way that it affects the poorest families. Because if you also walk into a supermarket, Jack Monroe made this really important point as well. 10 years ago, you could dine in for 2 meals for £10. Okay. Now you walk into a supermarket and you can buy dine-in for 2 meals for £10 as well, and that's for the higher end of the market. So the reality is, for the better off, inflation really doesn't impact on their lives in the same way that impacts for many of the people that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Williams, I can't see you. Oh, there you are, hiding behind Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The fact that we even say heating or eating in Britain these days is a failure of this government and a failure of us to respond appropriately. That people are facing fuel bills of up to £500 a month. How is that even possible to pay those sorts of amounts of money? This government has failed to regulate the energy market, and they've failed to tax the North Sea oil and gas producers who have seen their profits soar during the energy price crisis. The government has failed to insulate our homes, as the programmes have all been stripped. Haringey Council is trying to mitigate this as best we can. There is, in fact, an extensive financial support for residents struggling with the cost of living, such as Haringey Here to Help and the Haringey Support Fund. Our work on insulating homes will reduce bills and help tackle the climate emergency. We are stepping in where the government is failing. but frankly, even with everything Haringey is doing, we do not have the resources to tackle the cost of living crisis alone. We need the government to act and to take decisive action. Thank you.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm old enough to remember times when life was a bit simpler and we just had to pay your gas to British Gas and you bought your electricity from the electricity board. But since, because of Tory dogma and those, we had the privatisation of our energy sources, and prices have just gone up exponentially even before this latest crisis. I think this is a really important motion because in a borough like Haringey, these latest price rises are just going to push people completely over the edge. I mean, it's almost frightening to contemplate just how serious this issue is going to be for residents in our borough. And I think it's only too right that we are asking the leader of the council to lay out in terms what it's going to mean for residents of Haringey and put it before the Tories that this is absolutely intolerable. People are not going to be able to survive these increases that are coming down the line, and we have to lay it out in terms before the government. So I welcome this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Some really good points that have been made in this debate, and I just want to, in terms of the amendment, apart from the fact that we received the amendment at 12 o'clock today, so we haven't been able to, look at the dynamics and mechanics of being able to ensure some of the two of the other issues, which were to do with essentially the naming and shaming, if you like, of landlords. Those kind of things is not something we're going to be just agreeing to in a motion now. And what I would say in terms of the retrofit is that this council has one of the most ambitious retrofitting programs in the country for our local authority. So the idea that we can turbo boost that even further, absolutely, we will try, but we're not going to put a motion that says we're going to accelerate it beyond the ability of our resources. And we need to increase our resources, which is what the government needs to be stepping in to do to help fund the insulation of not just council homes, but everybody's homes. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. So we will now go to a vote on the amendment, and then we will, as we do, follow through if it's passed, and if it's not, go straight to the main motion unamended. So all those in favour of the amendment proposed by Councillor Dixon is very much in favour of the amendment, please indicate. Ooh. 13. All those against the amendment? Hands up so I can see. I'm not trying to be annoying, it's difficult from here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 23. Okay, any abstentions? Well, no, because that's the number. So the amendment falls 13 to 23 against. So we will now vote on the motion as on the paper. All those in favour of the motion? Oh, I see, right. Is that everybody? That saves me counting. Yes? Any abstentions? No, okay. So that means 0, 0. Okay. I'm now falling foul of my own rules. The original motion is passed 36 to 0. Well, thank you, colleagues. End of 4 years, long night. we've got pretty much everything into this evening, from recorded votes to friends from further afield. So thank you very much. It's not quite 10:30, so we've still managed to get within the extra half hour. So well done and thank you.